Welcome to So Fun September. I'm Donna.
And I'm Charlotte.
And we have some really fun and exciting things for you today. Thank you for being a part of the Quality Sewing and Vacuum family. We're located in the Pacific Northwest. And as you watch our program today, we'd love to hear from you. And if you would just put in your comment box where you're watching us from, that would be great. We'd love to see all the different places we're reaching.
And also today we're going to do some door prizes. And a name will be randomly selected from those of you who make a comment. So be sure and make a comment on our Facebook page. Tell us where you're from. Say hi, whatever. We want to hear from you.
Additionally, we will have a collection of door prizes that will be awarded to anybody who sends in a show and tell picture, and those names will be drawn next Tuesday, September 8th at 10 a.m. So you should hear back by that afternoon if you are a recipient of that drawing.
And because we're in the Pacific Northwest, that will be 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And remember to tell your friends to watch us on Facebook page, or go to your YouTube channel.
Now I'd like to insert right here, Charlotte and I did May, and we were in our homes, and it was technologically above my brain power. And I want to thank Carrie for doing the filming for us today here in the store.
Thank you, Carrie.
My pleasure. Okay, Charlotte.
So I am ready. We have a product here that's called Rescue Tape. Rescue Tape is exactly what it says it does. However, it is a two-sided tape. So when that hemline comes out of your skirt or your pants, and you have this in your repertoire, you take it off and you peel it off, and it goes on one side. You can put the fabric on the other side, and it's only a temporary stay. Do not iron it on. Take it off when you get home and fix your pants the right way or your skirt the right way. And then we have a product that is a stain remover and an ink remover. This is excellent. It's Amadex, and it is excellent for grease stains on your fabric. So if you have one of those grease stains that you get on a shirt when you spilled something, use that before it goes into the washing machine, and it works out great. Oh, and these. And then we have these cute little nippers. They are very handy. They're just for nipping threads. They have a nice little finger place for your finger. You can nip your threads. This is a great set to have extra for your classes and for your, well, you can give them as a gift. I think they're a great little gift, but they are our little tweezers. I mean, our little cutters.
Okay, I've shown you this before. This was a panel that we offered in May, but I think that the filming is going to show you better what I ended up doing with this panel. Now you could use this whole and just put binding around it and have the whole sentiment in one piece. Or you could take these sections apart and put them on pillows or on a canvas. But here's what I did. I took a picture of the panel and turned it into a black and white copy. And then I cut all those sections apart and re-glued them the way I thought I wanted this to turn out. Now my thought was this would be a table runner. But these sentiments across the width of the fabric are quite large. And with the added fabric, this project grew and grew and grew. And now it's the size of probably a king-size bed runner. But it's perfect for a wedding gift that I will be giving the happy couple. And as you can see, it can be viewed from any direction. So sometimes they look upside down to you, but if you're walking around that side of the runner, you could see this and read it anyway. I've done a little bit of channel quilting in the black, some cross hatch quilting in the actual word panels, and then some soft organic vines throughout the leaves. magic binding finishes off the front. And then I picked up this beautiful double happiness wicker fabric for the back, which is the sentiment I want to send along with this gift. So anyway, we have these panels available. They will be on the website. You can order these, and they're just a wonderful way to state how you feel about your family. Now, back to Charlotte.
Okay, we're going to talk about the fall into cardigan sweater that we have. Donna's going to put, if there's a picture up in the front, and Carrie will get that later. I made this out of a soft sweater knit, and it's so simple. There's 4 pieces. You have a front, you have a back, you have a shawl collar, and sleeves. Now, I did use my cover hem from my serger to do all my hemming on this. If you do not have one, we will sell you one. However, you can also use your home domestic sewing machine using a twin needle, and you'll have to watch out because the twin needle goes, you have 2 needles that go down, but you only have the bobbin thread underneath, and it goes zigzag. And so if your zigzag on your bobbin thread is too tight, it will make your fabric tunnel, and that's the only thing you have to watch for. But if you don't have a cover hem, you can still get the same look as a cover hem. And I'm going to pass you off to Donna for hers.
So I always start my garment out with what I call a muslin, which is something that if it doesn't work properly, it won't be a big deal if I end up having to give it away. This is fabric that's probably 15 years old. It's a wool knit, and it had a tiny little moth hole in it, which I was able to cut around, which was good because the garment came out, and I'm really happy with it. The pattern comes in an XL or an extra small to a 4XL, and like Charlotte said, it's got this wonderful big deep collar, long or 3/4 sleeves, and I cut mine out according to the pattern size in a 2XL. Now I'm going to go get a tape measure right now, and I'd like Carrie to focus on the pattern package. I felt that the model's sleeves were too tight for her. So we have a tape measure that, why didn't I think of this? It has a little handle on the end. You slip it in, and all I did was then tighten it up to the size of my upper arm. And then I knew what size I wanted to cut that arm so I would have plenty of room. This is a tremendous tool, especially like me, you don't have someone else holding the tape measure for you. Now the second garment I made, I wanted to show how deep that collar really was. And so I did a contrasting panel, and so it turns into like a built-in scarf. So I did 3/4 sleeves on both of mine, and then the scarf, it does come with an optional tie that you can either tie in the front or tie in the back, but I didn't think I needed any more gathering on this. So this is the one that I would consider my final best project, but I'm really happy with both of them. Okay, we're going to move on to the undercover pattern. And let me put this out so you can see it. This is a by Annie. And it's meant to cover up your sewing machine. Now, the pattern comes in 3 sizes, all sized basically for Bernina or larger, longer machines. And I decided I wanted to alter the sizes so it would cover my serger. Now this serger is a little bit bigger than mine, but you can see I've increased the depth. It comes with a front zipper pocket, a mesh pocket on the side to carry your foot pedal and your cords, and then a zipper on this side and another pocket. And then there's a pocket on the back that Charlotte's going to show you, and it doesn't have a zipper, but you can put like an instruction booklet in it. I left that off because I ran out of fabric. I started the project quilting following the shape of my fabric and realized that this was really labor intensive. So I've left those panels out on the front. And anything that's underneath, I have quilted in the crosshatch pattern, which would be that. Now, a really slick trick, if you're quilting and you don't want to draw lines, pick an interior fabric that's got the grid built in for you, and you just follow along at the intervals that you want. So that is the fabric that's down inside my cover. The flaps have by Annie magnets, and Charlotte will show those to you, but mine I just hand sewed in because I already had the cover done by the time I got the magnets. But they're just meant to snap the top shut to keep your machine from getting dusty.
You want me to do my cover now?
Sure.
Okay. My undercover, it is the large pattern, and it is for the sewing machine. And because I have a long arm quilter, I quilted my entire piece and then cut it apart. And it is directional, so I had to make sure that that all of my mannequins were going the right way. So you have to pay attention if you have a pattern that goes that way. I decided that this pattern is going to stay on my machine at home, and I didn't need the side pockets in it. This is one of the side pockets that Donna put on hers. So you make this with this little binding up here with the zipper in it, and then all you do is attach it to your side of your panel, and there's your pocket. And then you just stitch it right up here, and you can use this pocket for so many things, the same pocket in many items. Very good. Now on the zippers that I used zippers by the yard, or you can get Annie zippers then in 40 inches long and cut them, because they'll both have two slides on them, and you can buy one 40-inch zipper and it'll do this entire cover. So what Donna was talking about were these little tiny very, very strong magnets, and they are in vinyl, and so they are sew in. Donna told you that she put hers by hand. I did not. I put an extra piece of fabric, and this is what Annie asked us to do, and then they're put in right here. I'd use a drop of glue where they stayed in, and they are so strong, and they just hold this really good. Now the back pocket that I did, I need to tell you about this. The way that many pieces are in this pattern, and Annie has in her instructions, she has a page that has each piece that you're going to have, and you can cut it out, and then you can attach it to your pieces as you're cutting them out. I choose to use painter's tape because, as you can see, I just pulled it off and it stays on there, and then when I pick up the pattern, I know that I have the right piece for my pattern, and that's just painter's tape with a Sharpie written on it. We do have these little magnets available. You probably want to use these magnets because of the way that they're sewn in, and they're very, they're really strong, so they hold together well. I put the back pocket on, let's see, that has no zipper in it, and so this would be great for books or whatever, instructions. And then this side pocket has a zipper all the way across it, and you can put many things in there that you don't want to have flying out or coming out if you're going to take this machine anywhere. And the advantage of this cover is that if you're going to a class, it opens up this way and you can lift your machine with it, and it keeps this cover on your machine, and you're walking with your handle out here, and then when you get to class, all your machine, just take it off and sew. And Donna's going to talk to you about the piece of fabric that I quilted on my quilter, and you can see up close the design that I used, and she's going to show you that over there.
So Bayani Patterns suggests that you use a product that's exclusive to her. It's called Soft and Stable, and it's tricot on both sides of a very thin piece of foam. And it comes in black and natural. And what it does is it keeps the shape of your item upright. And it's important that these stand by themselves. And here's Charlotte's quilting. But the one thing that this thicker batting does is it creates a really thick amount of fabric that you need to cut. So I'm going to demonstrate right here, Carrie. This new mat is from Quilter Select, and I'm going to use that to show you a new rotary cutter. So this is just a great new mat with 2 color sides, so all your fabric will show up. It's got some great markings at 1/8, 1/4, 1/2 inch, and some angled lines that you can follow. You've got your fabric, and the advantage of having a long arm machine is Charlotte was able to quilt this whole thing and then cut the pieces down into the appropriate sizes. The 60 millimeter rotary cutter is just like the 45. It's got this weighted handle with the skid resistant rubber grips. But the advantage it gives you is to be able to cut through much thicker layers of fabric. And it's just like butter. Now, sometimes on the pattern, you'll find a need to cut 2 layers, and the deeper your blade, the more layers you can go through comfortably. This has a great magnetic blade changing option. And all you do to open it is just touch it and close it. And I have the 45 millimeter and now the 60, and this is the only one I use. It's got a great weight and it feels really good in your hand. So, what's next?
We have a prize.
Okay.
We have a prize. So, how does this work exactly?
You pick the prize and there's the winner.
Okay, we have a prize here that is the eye of the beholder, and it's hearts and flowers. And the winner number 1 is Melody Thomas. Congratulations. Carrie, you can have that. Thank you. Okay. So we're going to go, the next book is our Sweet Christmas book that Donna's going to show you. This has just table runners. Now the fun thing about these table runners is each table runner either has just solid blocks in it or it has the applique. I did mine with applique. You can use steam-a-seam under your applique. I did just a single stitch with monofilament thread all around my appliques on this particular runner. This is a relatively large runner, and the advantage of this is that you could have it on your table, and so people are going to be able to see your sleigh on each side of the table. So it wasn't a mistake to have a sleigh going this way and a sleigh going that way. It's put in the plan. The second one here is also in that book, and it was just a stocking book. But this particular block, they really wanted you to just do half square triangles here. I got to looking at this, and I'm thinking, this is a flying geese, this is a flying geese, and this is a flying geese, and this is a flying geese. So instead of doing a half square triangle block here and here, I went to my AccuQuilt Go Cutter, and I cut the exact size that I needed for a flying geese, and I eliminated quite a bit of sewing on that. I grid quilted this one with using my walking foot and just stippled this with my domestic sewing machine. Now on these little stockings here, I used monofilament thread and a blanket stitch all around them. This one I quilted, I think I quilted this on my my long arm and got this all quilted in free motion quilting on that and just went around the sleighs. And Donna has a couple of over here that she's going to show you that she did.
So the first one that I did was the gingerbread men out of the book. And you know I always try and show you when I make a mistake. And this was the runner from, you know, I don't know where. It was inspired by this gingerbread fabric I had left over from a tree skirt. So you know there were triangles and angles and all kinds of scraps that I just pieced together, but it's so busy you'll never see the seams. But of course it didn't stretch all the way the width of the pattern. So I added the red and I was quilting away, and I decided to do a little bit of pressing out here in the border. And right through my thread, the red bled right up to the surface. And I just got frustrated at that point, took the whole runner with no binding, no edges, and threw it in the washing machine. I didn't know how the gingerbread man was going to come out. I was just thinking of maybe doing a different design. But that was my fault. I didn't really pay attention to the warnings about red fabric. In the wash, when I threw this in, I put in a couple of color catchers, and I was amazed at how pink they came out. So it came out of the wash and the dryer, and of course the quilting just bloomed. It really is fun now because you can see all the work I did on the quilting. The upholstery fabric weathered really well. And it does look kind of like cookie dough if you look really close. But I still couldn't get all of the bleed out. So my solution to that was to just take more of the rickrack that I had put on the gingerbread man and stitch it all the way around my boo-boo. I had considered taking the whole border off and maybe using ironing board fabric here to make it look like the gingerbread man had just slipped off of a cookie sheet. But that seemed like a lot more work than just sewing the rickrack on. So this is my applique sample with the 3 half square triangle blocks and then the 2 blocks with the gingerbread men. And every mistake, every emergency creates a new way to be creative. The other runner, here again, this was fabric that was left over from a tree skirt. And so I went in and fussy cut all of the blocks. And the reindeer are positioned so when you have it on a table, you'll see 3 of them right side up, 3 of them upside down as you were walking around. Another set of half square triangles, and the focus really being not on this pinwheel that's created, but on the fussy cut reindeer. There's a little bit of grunge fabric for a border. And then I intended to do magic binding, and my mind just wandered somewhere else, and I cut it the wrong size. So typical magic binding is 1 strip is 1.5 inches wide. The other strip is 1 3/4 inches wide. And when you sew them together, you get this folded, then you'll get a flange. Well, I cut my lighter fabric 1.25 inches. But this whole month was one mistake after another. But I did a real scant 1/4 of an inch binding application from the back, folded it to the front, and was really pleased that this turned out to be like a equal 2-color binding instead of just the little tiny binding that you would see with the typical magic binding application. So that's my experience from that book. I loved the patterns and the option to do one of them without the applique, and I just added an extra block, gave this runner extra length. So it was fun. Now, one thing that we have I'd like to mention that goes along with my half square triangles is called ruler magic. And we have some rulers still in our collection that are slippery and don't have any skid resistance on the back of them. And that happened to be with what happened with my square up ruler. It slid all over the place. And when you're squaring up a half square, you need to be really precise. So if you're a westerly ruler owner, this would also be really handy. And the way this works is you just take the lid off, put a little bit on the tip of your finger, and place that on a couple of places where you know that your ruler is going to slide. Let it dry, and then set it on your fabric, and it really does hold it in place. As you work with your fabric, these little dots will get sort of fuzzy, and all you have to do is just go to the sink, a little bit of warm water, these dots rinse right off, and you go back and you just put another set on. So they're not permanent. You can remove them very easily. So,
And it won't scratch your table, won't scratch anything.
right. So I thought it was a great product. I really liked it.
It's a little bottle, but you get a lot. It's going to be able to be used for a lot of rulers.
Yeah, a lot of years.
Yeah.
So, and then I have a little bit of a sewing demo. Here's the next product I'm going to show you. You've seen the magic pins before. This is a shorter version of the magic pin. And I like to use short pins now. And you'll see what I'm doing is I've got these different colored blocks that I'm sewing together. And I've used the nesting method where I've pressed the seam in one direction on the top side and another direction on the back side. And I want these seams to lock together as I stitch. But I also pin them just in case there's any kind of walking or movement that I don't notice. So I've been using this little tiny pin here. And you can see as I sew, and of course you're not going to want to sew over that pin, it's a hard thing to get that pin out because the head is so small. But as you approach this, it's got a nice big long tapered comfort head, and they're much easier to grab and remove just as your needle starts to sew over them. We all know that we shouldn't sew over our needles, or our pins, I'm sorry. And so that held those seams together, and they locked up just perfectly. So.
I'll do my demo.
Okay, Charlotte has the demo now.
I'm going to do a demo that I was asked to do by one of our members. I've shown this in So Fun before, but they asked me to do it again and sent the email to the store. So it's the way that I put my binding strips together and then how I end my quilt with the binding. So this is it doesn't matter what size your binding is going to be. So this is 2.5 inch strip. and I'm going to put I'm going to put the right side face down on the ironing board. I have a nice hot iron here, and I have a glue stick here. And I am going to take this corner, which would be my right hand upper corner, bend it down to a 45 right here. Take my iron and iron right across here. I think it's hot. No, not quite. Let's get this hot. It's on. I think it needs to get warm here. Okay, then I want to take my second piece, and it's going to be right sides down, and I want to lay it perfectly. Well, before I do that, I want to take my glue stick, and I want to take and this is a washable glue stick. This is a Roxanne's. I'm going to put a little dot of glue right there. Now, to make that dry, when I put this next piece, this right side to the right side here, line that up perfectly, touch the iron to this. And now when I have this whole strip together, they're going to stay together. I need no pins, no anything. But the cool thing is that I have a perfect line right here to sew across. I sew across that. I'm not going to do you want me to sew it across? Should I, Lori, sew it across? Okay, let's sew it across. Let's go to the sewing machine and do this. Okay, so all I have to do is put my needle down, and it's going to go right straight, right, follow that line. Now, because this has glue in it, I need to pop that open. Because when I put the iron on it, it dried the glue. Pop it open. Then with your rotary cutter, cut a 1/4 inch seam across there, press it open, and there's your perfect 45 seam. It comes out perfect every time. You're not having to figure out which way that goes. Now, to end my quilt, it's basically the same way, and it takes no rulers, no anything. So I have put my binding on. When I start my binding, it's always going to go counterclockwise. Then when I turn it to the right side, I'm always going to work clockwise with it. So I'm at the end of my quilt, and you're usually going to leave at least 12 inches. And this is just one of the blocks that I made extra from my table runner there. And I did put Insul Bright in this and another layer of Warm and Natural. So this could be used as a hot pad on the table. So I'm here at the end and say I want to mark this. This is going to be the end of my seam allowance. So I want to pull this. Let's do this right here. So I've got a nice 45. I want to touch it with the iron. That's going to be my sewing line again. Now, one of the things that you want to make sure of, you're going to see that this is going to fold over just perfect into to the 45. Your next thing, what I do is I normally put a pin in this end so that it's going to stay nice and taut, and you're at the ironing board, so it'll stay right there. Then I'm going to take the end of the binding and I'm going to bring it over to this part of this 45, and that's where my cut line will be. And so I'm going to cut it there, and I forgot to take a pair of scissors here. Do we have a pair, maybe?
Scissors.
Let me do this. I'll just do it here. I forgot. So I'm going to cut it across right here. And usually before I cut this across, I want to make sure that I have it a little bit taut, because when I open this up and want to sew this across, I want it to make sure that it's taut and it's across. So now when I open this up, I will also, before I do this, I'm going to put a little bit of glue on that, and then I'm going to iron it, and it's going to stay right there. I want to touch it because I don't need to use any pins on this. So this is all stuck together. This piece is going to open up. This piece is going to open up, and then this is going to be folded like this, and you're going to sew directly across this line just like we did with the binding, and it's going to come out perfect. I do this on my Chanel trim on t-shirts so that you don't have a real bad bump in the back of your neck. You'll always have a real nice seam allowance that goes on the back here. Usually before I sew this, I always open it up and make sure that it's going to fit just right. And there's your end of your seam, your binding on your quilts, and you're ready to sew this down and then turn it. This would be turned to the right side. I chose to do it that way, but that's how I do it.
We're going to move on to the next pattern, which is right here. It's called Rad and Plaid. And next to it is a worksheet that is provided in the pattern so that you can actually either color in with pencils like Charlotte did, or you can place little snippets of the fabric that you chose to use. So you can keep all of these squares and stripes separate. It calls for 5 colors of fabric, the 3 major stripes, and then where those stripes cross over, and then where the same color crosses over. So it's something that I had to read through twice. I decided to approach this like it was a weaving. What would happen when this orange stripe passed over this green stripe? And what helped me tremendously is a fat quarter that I picked up here at the Tukwila store. And I just zeroed in on this section that I thought represented the green and the magenta, or the green and the orange. And that's where I got these squares. And it has very clear instructions on how to put all of these strips together. And it does turn out to look like they are weaving over and under each other. I used a lightly printed gray background fabric. And then I quilted it with a kind of a starburst pattern in the center. And what's called, I don't remember what this is called. It's sort of fans out from the points that are created at the end. Now I chose to bind mine traditionally. There's my background fabric. So it's just got a dark gray framework around it. And Charlotte is going to show you a different method on how to finish it up.
So this is my Rad and Plaid, and I'm like Donna, I have colored pens. So I colored my paper with colored pens so that I knew where this strip was going, where this color was going, and then I laid them down on the floor. I do a lot of my piecing, I lay them down on the floor, I have them all marked, and then I can just pick them up and sew. I got a little confused with it, and I put it away, and I thought I wasn't doing it right, and when I brought it out, I was doing it correctly. But I guess it would just made my brain fuzzy. And on the quilting on this, I just used the walking foot and just did grid quilting, never used a ruler or anything. I just used the foot of my sewing machine. But this is put right sides together and sewn and then turned right sides out without a binding. And this is actually the way that the pattern says to do it. So one of my tricks that I learned years ago on doing when you're going to make an envelope and you're doing right sides together, if you will look right here, this is going to be my opening where I want to turn my fabric, and it's called sew on and sew off. So when I come and do my seam allowance, now if you're doing home deck and this is a pillow, you're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, but on this I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So my 1/4 inch seam, and then I'm going to sew off the fabric here. And then on the other side, I'm going to come around and I'm going to sew off the fabric here. The purpose of that is that when we turn this right side out, we normally stretch this fabric and then it doesn't lay right. So before I turn it though, I have a piece of steam seam sewn to this side. Take the paper off, turn it right side out. This is so little, I just did it a little tiny thing. Right sides out. And then I have this steam seam right here, and so all I do is tuck them together, make that nice 1/4 inch little seam in there, and of course you're going to push out your corners and get them all nice and crisp. And then when you sew across, you don't have any extra fabric. Usually you end up, if you don't put that little sew in and sew off onto your seam allowance, you will end up with extra fabric here and you'll have a bunch. And that's how I do mine. That's it. What are we doing now?
You're up next. Yep.
Okay.
You're going to flow right into the wine.
Oh, we're going to go to the wine. Okay, wine totes. They were so fun. Also, on this pattern, because I use colored pens, I had what pieces were going to be the different colors for this particular one or whatever one I was working on, and it works out really well. I laid them out on the floor because this is a sew as you go. This is sew by numbers instead of paint by numbers. So you get, in this pattern, you're going to get your 3 wine totes that are all printed on this piece of batting. So you're only going to cut out about a 1/2 inch all the way around. And you need to make sure that these lines come out far enough so that when you put your fabric on them, that you're going to know where to put it, your next piece. And so what I did is I had all 3 of these cut out, and then I started cutting my fabrics, and I used my trusty little tape and put the numbers down on them and I put them on the floor, and then just picked them up. And because one side goes 1, 2, let's see, it goes 1 and then 3 and whatever. So all I did was I did one side first, and then I turned it around and I did the other side. But I had them stacked so that I knew what numbers to go. It keeps you simple. It went up simple and easy. Now, I'm going to show you in a little bit on how to use our binding foot that is, or quilt binding foot. And it is either a Viking foot or it's a Pfaff foot. And we do sell these. And you're going to be able to put binding on, and it's going to sew perfectly around here. So this is what I did on my totes. This piece has to be cut on the bias because you're going around a circle. And all I did is cut it 1 3/4 inches wide. And then I ran it through, and I'm going to do a demo on that in a little bit and show you how that quilt binder works and how quick and easy it is.
Okay, these are my samples, and I swore I wasn't going to do any more Seahawk fabric, but sure enough, somehow it jumped out at me. I did not always follow the lines that were given me. I was more interested in the overall shape. And so you can see down here, I've combined 2 sections so that you see more of the number and the wording and the logo. This one does have a traditional quilt binding on the edge. And I'm sorry, Charlotte just hates it when I say this, but I love to hand sew. So these are all hand sewn in. She's groaning over there. This is what not to do. I had this piece of Asian, kind of a scenic pattern, and I thought, well, that would just be great for the bottom half of this, and then just combine some squares above with some Asian characters, and I don't think it reads well at all. So please, don't do that. Really, the lines that they've given you are a great suggestion, and as you stitch each change of fabric down, you're also quilting at the same time. So these 2 have traditional quilt binding on them. This one just has a regular bias cut, folded, double fold, that I just slipped over the edge and then machine stitched down.
I did have one more thing to say that I did. My husband thought that they needed a little bit more structure on the bottom if we had a full bottle of wine in here. And these are going to make a hostess gift for somebody. So he went out to the shop and he's made me a little circle, and I could put it right down on the bottom, and that just keeps the wine bottle sitting there, and it doesn't make it fall down at the bottom. But if we go over to the sewing machine now, I'm going to show you how I did that binding. This is what the foot looks like, and it looks like quite a contraption here, but it is the coolest contraption. I have this preset for my sewing machine, which happens to be a Viking. This comes in with a Viking or a Pfaff, and so I know exactly where my seam line will be in accordance to where I push this binder over, and I've tightened down the screws so that stays there. The only screw that I take off and on is the one that goes on the plate right back here. So when I pull this out of the sewing out to use, it's always going to sew exactly where I want it to if I haven't messed with these two big screws right down here. Now this will only work on the new Epic and the Icon. I don't know if you can get a different plate for another Viking or a Pfaff machine, but it's because of where the hole is for this screw. You need a stiletto. We sell stilettos in the store. And this is your piece of fabric that we're going to bind. And you're going to stick it with if this is right side. This is going to be your wrong side. This is going to be your right side. And you're going to stick it through here. And one of the things you'll first use is this stiletto and pull this all the way through. This has a little rake on it, and you put your fabric through there. Now, this is going to come this way. Okay. Okay, there we go. Now I can put my foot down, put my needle in it, and then all I'm going to have to do is I watch this. Whoops, it's not going on me. There it goes. Whoops, we've got something stuck with. Okay, so we're done. And I can lift. Oh, the needle. Oh, the needle wasn't in tight. Oh, the needle fell out. Okay. Things happen.
Happens when you like.
Happens at home. Okay, so now I'm going to say that I'm done here since I don't have a needle in here. And I can cut this off. Oh, I don't have any thread. It didn't even sew. That was cool. Let's do this again. Okay, we'll put a needle in. Do you want to talk? Does Donna want to talk while I do this or what?
You want me to take it over to Donna?
Yeah, let her do something while I fix this. Because obviously...
Well, we're coming up on another door prize. Carrie, do you have a name?
I do.
Okay. What we have this time is an Anita Good. It's called Nail Art. So it's got a lot of really cute kind of open stitch patterns available. And this is going to Joan Bush. So congratulations, Joan Bush. Get a hold of us. How are they getting a hold of us? I'm sorry.
Private messages on Facebook.
Sorry?
Private messages on Facebook.
Okay, private message Quality on Facebook, and we'll get your mailing information, and we'll get this out to you.
Or you can pick it up in your local store. Or you can pick it up in your local quality store.
Let us know what your local quality store is, and we'll make sure and get it out to you there, since we're all open now. How you doing, Charlotte?
Not good.
Okay. Maybe I will just go on to the next item, which is called Winter Wishes, and this is our embroidery this month. I picked up a remnant at the fabric store. It was kind of a heavyweight linen. I'm pretty sure it's home deck. And it's got just a light smear of silver, kind of a silvery white. I thought it looked really icy and wintry. And I did stabilize it with Shapeflex 101. And And Charlotte will talk to you more about that when she talks about her sample. This is just a beautiful combination of wonderful winter sayings. It's easy to do. Each saying has a registration line stitch out, and you're able to move up to the next portion of fabric. So this is stitched at 5 different times. And the registration lines keep it so that your letters are all horizontal and not tilting. And then there's a registration line that goes through the center. It was very easy to follow her instructions, and the machine just does all the work for you. All you have to do is decide on the color of your thread. Now, I do want to warn you, with this choice of fabric, these beautiful snowflakes do not show up in white. And it was really important that this snowflake down here show up because it's the O in snow. So I have used, I did a second stitch out in some turquoise thread, and then I did accentuate that with a little bit of watercolor pen so that this stands out. But here's a couple more snowflakes that don't show. You can take any one of these and stop at the end of that stitch out. You could have just Welcome Winter and say wrap it over a canvas. Put it on a pillow. And there's a sample up here that Charlotte will show you where I've taken one of these sentiments and stitched it out all by itself, and it will probably become a pillow. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay.
We have good news here. So I'm back at the sewing machine with my binder on there, and I'm going to stick this fabric in here because I want it to bind my quilt. And it's going to go right like this. And I've already got my needle down, and I've done a couple of stitches in my binding. So now I want to put my foot down, and then I'm going to sew. And we'll hope that the needle doesn't fall out this time. And Donna's correct, I don't like hand sewing, so this tool is wonderful for me. Okay, let's lift up that needle. Oh, it didn't sew again. Okay, we're not going to do that again. This is what it's going to do for you. It's going to make this wonderful tie right like here, and I don't know why it's not picking up my bobbin thread, but it wasn't picking up the bobbin thread, and I'm sorry about that. So I will talk to you about winter wishes that I did. This is sparkly fabric, just white. I did it all in grays and kind of monochromatic colors because I had this black and gray fabric in my resource center, and I had the silver rickrack. And my first one I did like the pattern said to do, which was they wanted you to use some sticky back stabilizer. I have one completely made, and I couldn't get all the sticky back stabilizer off. So I chose to do something entirely different. And I have a sample here from Donna that we've done. And so for doing this and putting the stabilization on it, one of the things that we are going to use, first of all, I starch my fabric with Best Press. When I use Best Press or any starch, I am going to spray the back of my fabric first, let it soak in, turn it to the right side, press it because you want the starch to come up to the top, the Best Press to come up to the top. If you are to, Best Press is a kind of a starch, and so it will stick to it will flake a little if you do it when it's too wet. You have to remember to let it soak into the fabric and then hit your iron with it. Then we're going to put a layer of Shape Flex, which is a Pellon product, and it is a woven interfacing. It's not a stabilizer, it's an interfacing that we use in clothing. But this is going to stabilize your stitches on your fabric. Then you're going to use an additional piece of stabilizer. This is Stitch and Wash, or is it just Tearaway?
It's tearaway.
Okay, Stitch and Wash is a tearaway. So this tearaway that's on the back here, this is going to stabilize your, whoops, said that wrong. The stitch, the shape flex is going to stabilize your fabric. This is going to stabilize your stitches. So you come out with a perfect look, no wrinkles, no anything in that. Now, her registration marks are wonderful on this. And you'll see a registration mark that goes across here. It's sewn in. And then one that goes down. You line that up with your hoop, and everything comes out in perfect. It comes out perfect. You could, like Donna said, you could, because there's 5 hoopings here, you can just take part of this and make a nice wall hanging with it. Now, how I did, Donna used a large hoop with hers that actually you hoop the fabric. I used my monster magnetic hoop, the snap hoop, and I just snapped it together, and it just turned out beautiful. All I did was stitch it on my, I think I did meandering stitching on my domestic machine on that. And there, I'm done with that one.
No, I just want to say that I waited until Charlotte had done her projects and then asked her, what do you think? And that's when she told me about not using the sticky stabilizer, but just putting this in the hoop and then gluing this on top of the hoop.
That's right.
And that worked. Now, for a single project, yes, I did hoop this whole thing. Mm-hmm. But the larger one down there, I just moved the fabric across the top. You have to do a little bit of repair work in your tearaway, but just glue it down with the lightweight glue stick and just keep moving it as you go.
A question from our customers. They want to know what would be the smallest size you could use to create that project.
The pattern says 6 by 11. Oh, I'm sorry. What is the smallest size hoop that would accommodate this? The pattern measurements on the envelope say 6 by 11. Now, Charlotte has probably used the default size, and I have increased my stitch out as large as I can get them, but I have a really big hoop.
So this is this right here. And yes, I did mine to the default. And what's fun about this is that when you have 2 partners, sewing partners in Sew Fun, is that we can take the same pattern or the same design, and we totally interpret it differently. So you can see that there's many ways to do one pattern.
Yeah.
And so mine was to the default, and her stitching is beautiful, and her instructions are great, and she did increase hers. My machine will do that big, but I just did this exactly to the size.
Well, I figure if I'm going to go to all the trouble to get that module, that embroidery module out, get it all set up, more is better. So I just make all my embroideries as large as I can make them.
I love it.
Because I can.
Because you can. That's
because
true.
I can.
Because you can. Okay.
Okay, so we are going to move on to our last book. It's called Pre-Cuts, Quick and Easy Quilts. And these patterns suggest a number of different pre-cuts that you probably have in your stash. It's got 10 projects, and they span the gamut of beginner to more complicated. So Charlotte and we always try and coordinate and do different patterns, but this time we both fell in love with the quilt called Braid My Way, which I don't mind if we both do the same thing, because look at how different they look.
They're totally different.
Yeah. Now the book has Braid My Way on the cover, and all of those braid blocks are surrounded by a number of different prints, and it makes it a little busier than what I wanted. So both Charlotte and I shouldn't talk for you, but I am.
You're doing a good job.
We have chosen one fabric to frame all these blocks out. Mine, I was worried that the 2.5-inch strip pack, it's a Maywood pack called Twilight, and I was afraid maybe the patterns were too big to see the braid, but stepping back, I think it's okay. So I finished it off as the pattern instructed with a smaller, darker border here, and then a larger tan border that pulls some of these tan sections out. It's all been quilted by my long arm quilter in a little rose and leaf pattern. She just did an outstanding job. And before I finished it, I saved enough of the 2.5-inch strips to do the binding around the outside edge. So these are all full length, the 40 inches that I got out of them. And then I still had some left over. So I've put those down the center, or a little off center on the back. This is a batik that of course didn't stretch the full length of the quilt. So here's the rest of the strips, that framing fabric, and then a little bit of something I had in my stash.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. And here, to have her grown again, I have hand finished all of the binding on this quilt.
Not me. Yeah, we don't do that. Okay, so I had this Christmas jelly roll, and it was holiday, it was a Moda pack, and I've had it for a long time, and I thought, I was kind of with Donna, but I was more worried about the fact that it's pretty busy. It's a really busy, they're all busy pieces. So I kind of went through and decided that I'd go ahead and make it anyway. I have a daughter that is born in December through 3 days before Christmas. So I'm going to give this to her for Christmas and birthday this year. But I think it turned out really good. And I was like Donna, I did not want to do anything that was going to take away from the actual block. I mean, all these are little tiny braids. They're only end up to be about 2.5 inches braids that you're going to do in this block. I used a ruler to do mine that actually cut off both sides of my braid, so I didn't have any additional loss of fabric. And I thought the red brought it out, and then with the black trim here. And then I did quilt it. I quilted it on my long arm with red king tut thread. And so the only red that you can really see that shows up was right here onto the black, the other just blends into the fabric. And actually with the red into all these busy blocks, I was pleased with it. I just hope my daughter is. And yes, I did not.
When you talk that way, they can't hear you. So if you can face this way.
Okay. What do I need to say?
Whatever you need to say, just say it for the camera.
So my blocks, okay. So my king tut thread was used here, and I used red because I thought it would come out better where all this was red in here, and it just shows a little bit of the red on the black, even though the black has the gold in it. And I did a small hem. That's the quilting on it, and it's all one color on the back. And I forget the name of that pattern. And then I used monofilament thread, and I can stitch right down in this ditch in the front, and then it's red on the back or black on the back, and you can't see it. But that's my quilt.
Okay, the next one from that book that I did is called Hop, Skip, and Jump. And this is fabric that was similar to what we know of as a layer cake today, a layer cake being a 10-inch by 10-inch square of fabric. Although I won this at the Federal Waist Store when I was a SoFun member and I was in the audience. This was the door prize one night, and I won this roll of fabric. And I didn't know what to do with it. It's probably been over 10 years. This is what I got. It's actually 9 by 11, because like I said, I don't think layer cake had been coined as a term back in those days. So these are the last two pieces I have left. It calls for 20 layer cake blocks that make 20 blocks for your quilt, and I didn't have that many, so my block count is only 16. And then I've used this as a background color. It's a little gold embossed fabric, and there's a tiny bit of gold on that Christmas fabric too. And then the quilting, and I did look this up, this is called corner radiating quilting. And this came out of the Walk book, which I use all the time now to do my own quilting. And so it just alternates, every block changes direction. Now, that's a piece of thimbleberries, which is probably about the same vintage as the fabric on the front. This was another one of those, I wasn't paying attention. I'd gotten through cutting all of these strips, and I thought in my head, you're doing such a good job, you haven't screwed up yet. And so sure enough, the last 4 strips I cut were supposed to be 5.5 inches. I cut them at 5. And I didn't have that much fabric extra because I didn't have 10 by 10 blocks. So they are hidden, they're spliced together, and they're hidden up at the top somewhere. And my solution to that was not doing a traditional 2.5 inch binding, but doing a straight of grain. Actually, it is 2.5 inches, but it's double folded. So when it slips over the edge, it almost entirely conceals those boo-boos. So that's why I have them hung up at the top.
Hey, we all do that.
Anyway, it's got a real vintage look to it because it is vintage fabric. And then finally, my last one is called Ziggy, and the Ziggy Runner. And this was a 12 block rail fence kit that I picked up and didn't ever use. So I added some of my own fabrics to the colors. Each one of these strips is put together like a traditional binding where you create that 45-degree angle and alternate your colors. And then in one row, you put 4 fabrics, and in the next row, you put 3. And after you get all your strips done, you lay it out on your floor and decide where the best contrast is. Obviously, I was not paying attention here. I would not have put those 2 together, but that's what happens. Now, I did have some extras left over. And there's all my little cut ends that I had left over. And I didn't have the heart to get rid of them. So I've just placed them in the center of my background fabric. Now, one thing I do like to point out is that background fabric is a batik, but it's really busy. And there was the longest time when I thought that was what I was going to border this quilt in. And you can see, here it is. There it is. You can see probably what a disaster that would have been. And so I went back through my batiks and I found this darker blue, which repeats itself throughout the quilt, and gave it a good substantial framework to kind of bring your eye into the beauty of the batiks and not lead it out with something that was too wild. So those are the last 2 I have from that book, and Charlotte's going to go on with her 2 more.
This was also in that book, and this was a quilt. However, I had this fabric left from a fat quarter pack, and I had enough to make a table runner. And there's 3 blocks here. Starts with this center here, and then it just works around. It's almost like a log cabin, except it's a larger piece. I cut them, I think, 2.5 inch strips. We did do 1/2 inch square triangles on the corner, and I had one other piece of fabric left from this piece and along with this, and I almost didn't have enough to do this binding on here, but this was the best this was the best fit for this particular table runner. But this is the center, and then they just go all the way around, and you end up with, I think these strips have a half square triangle put on each end of them as they go around to help you do that half square triangle little pinwheel at the end. Now this I quilted on my long arm, and I did it in some daisies and stuff since it's such a busy print and there was flowers in it. And I had this blue fabric at home that I just used on the back, one solid piece. Then the next one this is called Charmingly Scrappy. So this block in here, this 4 quarter triangles right in here, every block was made from a charm pack, and it was a Maywood charm pack, and I was fortunate enough to have enough Maywood strips that I had left that were in odd pieces to do the corners on there. And then this is Maywood that I did in the binding or the sashing on it. And actually the quilt wanted you to do another square in here, of another corner square here, and I thought it would be way too much and too busy. And I made this in a size for a baby because I'm back behind in my baby quilts. And I use I use a light blue fabric on the back, and I quilted this also on my long arm with king tut thread. And a lot of times in my baby quilts, what I'll do is I'll sew my binding from the back and bring it to the front, and I will sew it down. Or with the new quilt binder, you can also do that and do perfect corners all the way around, and you could do this quilt all the way on the machine with that quilt binder. And I think that's what I have left from that.
So 2 things. Someone's asking, how long does it take to make a quilt like that size? So repeat the question, please.
That's an unfair question. And the reason that it's an unfair question...
And what was the question?
Oh, the question was how long it would take me to make a quilt like this. And I always hate to say, because I've been sewing for over 60 years. So something that might take me 3 hours or 4 hours, it might take you a day. And so I learned over the years of sewing that if you could only take 10 minutes or 20 minutes, you're a busy mom. And I had to do this. I had 3 children, and I sewed all the time. And if I only had 10 minutes or 30 minutes or 20 minutes, I would go sew and not try and sew super fast. And I think when we're younger, we're trying to do things fast and get them done. It's better to do them slow, and because you'll make less errors. You know, I learned the hard way. I've ripped out a lot of things. I still rip out a lot of things. My husband looks over at me and he's going, you know, because people will ask my husband, does she rip out anything? And he said, yes, a lot. So it still happens. So it might take me, like I say, 2 or 3 hours to do this, but it's going to take maybe longer. So that's an unfair question for me. So don't hurry with it, in other words.
Charlotte, one more question that came up is how you do corners with the quilt binder.
Oh, how you do corners with the quilt binder. That is so cool. I wish you know what, maybe later I can do a demo on a machine where we're actually pulling up bobbin thread, because it works a little bit better like that. You know, these things happen to us at So Fun too, so this is just kind of normal. And thank you for going with us, but I will show you that. It is really, really easy to do, and I think I'm dropping on my head. Anyway, I'll take this out. So, and you can get a corner just like this with your binder. And what I did with mine when I got my binder is I got some squares of just pre-quilted fabric, cut my strips, and then practiced. So I kind of have some really rugged looking pot holders to start off with, because you're practicing, but the more you do it, the easier it is. And we'll try and get that up so that you can see how that works. And now for the winner, because this was made with a charm pack, the next winner is going to get a charm pack. So you can make your own quilt with that. And the winner number 3 is Linda Oaksley. Is that correct? Olsky? Olesky. If I mispronounced your name, please excuse me. But this is your fabric in a charm pack. And it is Broomhilda's Bakery by Maywood Studio. Thank you.
And then finally, the last item that we have on the list are scarves, and they're called Bizarre Rayon Batiks from Moda. I get a lot of questions about the scarves that I wear, and typically they're just remnants that I pick up at the fabric store. But these scarves are such great quality rayon, scarf weight rayon, and we have them in 6 colors. Let me show you the 3 that are just, or the 4 that are just plain. This is called the red floral, and you can see they're 26 inches wide by 72 inches long, and they do have the fringe on the bottom. This is the blue and teal leaves, and this one was a little challenging to name, but on the price list we're calling it sage and green. It's kind of an acid yellow color. I took 3 of them and did some stitching on them so that you don't have to just wear them plain. Now you all know that you can take a scarf like this and just tie it in the center. But if you want to do something fun, you can, flip the tails back from the front or the back. You can also divide it in half. And we're coming up on the weeks here shortly that I'll have a scarf on every day because my neck gets so cold. That's what happens when you have short hair. So these are some of the traditional scarf methods. But think about taking the side seams of the scarf and stitching it up to about 12 inches, 15 inches from the fold. And then when you put it on, you've got this kind of asymmetrical poncho. What a great thing to take to a wedding, an outdoor wedding where it's warm in the afternoon and it's cool in the evening and you need something elegant to slip over the top of your dress. Then this is my favorite. This is the Infinity. And what I've done is I have cut the fringe off and sewn the ends together, but before I did that, I put a twist in it. So you turn the fabric once, do a French seam, so that seam it once and seam it again. That tucks all of those loose ends inside. And I love to wear my scarves down. Covers up a lot of figure flaws. But you can also give it a twist and then wear it like this under a coat if you need that extra padding at the back of your neck. And then finally, another thing that you could do is take those side seams and stitch up from the fringe towards the center. I believe this is about 18 inches. Do that on both sides. Now that leaves you still the availability of wearing this like a regular scarf. But what you can do then is just put this on and it becomes like a little shrug. Now you don't have to worry about tucking those ends underneath your arms because you end up with sleeves. Now the decision is yours. Do you want to cut that fringe off? Do you want to maybe hem it at 3/4 length? So you choose what you want to do with the ends. You've got plenty of fabric. It's obviously way too long for me. But those are just some of the ideas that you can use with these shawls, and the quality of the fabric is just yummy. So I encourage you to look on the price list. So Fun members, $7.99.
And aren't they,
Great deal.
Aren't they by Moda?
Yes.
Yes,
They're a Moda product. So
Do you know what kind of material it is?
100% rayon. So very, very beautiful.
These are a little bit long for a short person, and so I'm going to take them and I'm going to fold it in half before I put it on, because I can put a half, the folded half over here, bring it around, and it can come over here and hang, and I can put a pin right here and it doesn't move off. But for me to just put them around straight I'm rather short. And so I do, so those of you that are short, you can still use these. And like the one that's draped, or the magenta one, that's perfect for you. But if you're taller, it's always those things are kind of nicer for you.
Okay, that wraps up our program this month.
Remind people about 2021.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Okay. We have reminders here.
We want to give you a heartfelt thanks for hanging in with us through our home filming and now the filming in the stores. And we invite you to come back each and every month to see the program. If you're a SoFun member for 2020, you will be receiving a 2021 membership for free. So be sure and keep checking in with us each month, and we'll be getting those cards out to you.
Probably beginning to the middle of October.
In the middle of October, you'll be receiving your 2021 SoFun card.
And calendar.
And calendar. That calendar has become a very, very popular item with you. And I think they probably took some of the other photos that we've taken over the years, and for the first 2 months of this year that we actually did SoFun in our stores, I think.
And show and tell pictures.
And show and tell pictures will be in there. So that's why it's really important is to have show and tell, because you never know if your item isn't going to show up in that cute little calendar that we'll give SoFun members. And Don and I really want to thank you for tuning in today. We know it's a busy schedule, and this is kind of a different format for us, but we want to thank you. And thank you for those that don't know who we are and what we do, but we've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, Charlotte and I have been a partner for a number of years, and we know what to expect, and we know that not every pattern is going to fit. You can see the difference in our height.
No.
And so sometimes I pick something and she goes, no way. And but that's
true.
okay. That's okay. We
We work well together.
yeah, we do. So thank you for joining us today.